All team, give it everything you got!
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in.
Never get between a Mandalorian and a weapons package.
This is the way.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
She's as important as he is.
With your hosts, Tricia Barr and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of that.
Welcome, Yub Cubs, to Fangirls Going Rogue Mandalorian Season 3 premiere episode spectacular. I am Tricia Barr from Fangirl Blog, one of your hosts, and with me is my bestie in the Force, Sarah Woloski from Skywalking Through Neverland. It's good to see you again. It's only been a day.
I know. This is so exciting that we're able to talk to each other, and we saw each other in person this week. Woo! It's been so fun, Tricia.
It has. It's been too long since we've seen The Mandalorian anyway, which we will have some conversations about later. But I think we're ready for the first episode. If you haven't seen the first episode, go back, stop, spoilers. We're going to talk about it. And we're also going to have some words of wisdom from Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau from the press roundtable that we got to do, which is always our favorite because we get to sit down with other Star Wars fan podcasters and they all have the best questions. It's like this team effort.
They do, and you can tell when our little video pops up for them that they know that they're going to get some deep questions, as Dave Filoni says.
Deep question, yes. So much fun. And we'll get to that. We'll listen to it and have a little bit of discussion about what they said, because even though we hadn't seen the episode at that point, we've been doing this long enough. We kind of know the questions to ask to get them to give us clues for what's to come ahead. So I feel like we know how to sort of work that angle now. Yes.
So, before we get into it, let's give a summary of Chapter 17, The Apostate. Just for, if you're listening to this later and you don't remember or need a refresher, it's always good to have this. And The Apostate was directed by Rick Famuyiwa and written by Jon Favreau.
The episode begins with the armorer forging a new Mandalorian helmet and bestowing it upon a foundling in a ceremony located on a beach. Before the ceremony finishes, a giant alligator turtle creature, Gargantugator, crashes the party and the Mandalorians begin to battle. They are losing until an N1 Naboo starfighter swoops in and takes out the creature. Din Djarin and Grogu save the day.
Later, the armorer, even though Din saves the day, she reminds Din that he's no longer a Mandalorian because he took off his helmet, and Din must travel to the living waters of Mandalore to atone. This is the way. To begin this quest, Din returns to Navarro and Greef Karga, who has become the High Magistrate and cleaned up the town, except for pirates who accost Greef, but he takes them out with the help of Din, except for one who is left alive so he can warn others to stay away or that the town has been cleaned up.
Din is there because he needs a droid on his quest, and he wants none other than his old partner IG-11. But the droid reverts to its former psycho programming and tries to kill Grogu. After the droid is taken out, Mando heads to Calavela, a planet in the Mandalorian system. Before he arrives, he's ambushed by the same pirate gang he and Greef met in the town. And after successfully dodging a run-in with the captain pirate, he heads off to the Mando system. Never trust a pirate, he tells Grogu.
In the Mandalorian system, in the planet Calavela, he visits Bo-Katan, who is just chilling in her abandoned castle on a throne, in an empty throne room. And she tells him that the mines with the living waters are beneath the Civic Center in the city of Sundari. And with his next step in the quest sealed, he leaves. And the episode ends. And you're like, damn it.
Damn it.
I know, right? No, it was only 35 minutes? I think they fit a lot.
Short. It was 36 minutes, I believe, was the whole shebang, and that includes credits. So
yeah, so like 32.
There's a lot happening, though.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes. So, we'll share our thoughts. But before we do that, so Tricia, you and we actually got to see this on the big screen at the El Capitan Theater for the Mandalorian season 3 premiere. So let's just share a little of that experience before we get into it.
Well, first of all, it's always fun just to be invited. Thank you very much to Lucasfilm, who took care of us and made sure we were included. I know I've been part of the press stuff, getting the invite to the first Mandalorian when we didn't even know what it was. So it's so different now, because back then we didn't even have expectations. And I remember they showed us a little bit of footage of what's the creature that Grogu and Din battle in the Mudhorn. Oh. And we didn't see the Grogu part. We just saw Din and the Mudhorn. So we had no context of all those things. And now going into season 3, there's a lot of context and hopes and dreams of what possibly could be seen, and want to know more. We didn't even know Din's name, right? For a long time in season 1.
Same with Grogu. We didn't know until season 2.
So now they're characters that we know them better, and we're in love with them, right? Nobody knew that we were going to see Grogu, and now, just the things they can do with him are incredible. But at the premiere, they always have all these cosplayers. And I want to shout out to the Pelimato cosplayer that we saw, who was amazing. And I remember she was saying to you, Sarah, something about the costume itself.
I remember her saying, like, I'm in my mid-40s and I'm so glad I can pull off this costume, which I think is awesome that they're making characters now that, like, anyone can wear, or like a wider range swath of people feels comfortable cosplaying as.
And it's certainly not a complicated costume. I think probably the most complicated thing is getting the hair right, if you really wanted to go for it. But it's essentially a jumpsuit. It's comfortable. She doesn't have to really put too much together. Like the armor that people wear is so incredible and detailed. And we saw one Mandalorian guy that when he took his helmet off, he even looked like Pedro Pascal. I mean, that guy was impressive.
Yeah, he totally did. Yeah, and then I was drawn to a Thrawn cosplayer because I just love Thrawn, and so I wanted to take a picture with him in case he showed up in the show at some point. I don't know, not that Thrawn cosplayer, but Thrawn himself, right? Kind of leading to that. And yeah, so we talked with him a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, do you love Thrawn from Heir to the Empire trilogy?" And he's like, "Actually, I've never read it. I just knew him from Rebels, Star Wars Rebels, and was really into the character." And we just thought that was so great.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being there at Celebration Europe when just Thrawn got introduced. He was going to be in Star Wars Rebels, and that there's new fans of the character, which just kind of shows how much he resonates. It doesn't matter if you read him in the books or you see the things that he did in the episode. And then we even get a little bit of tie to Star Wars Rebels in this first episode, which was really cool. And Thrawn's fate, right? Because he and Ezra disappeared with the Purgles off into space. So that was kind of fun to see that. But it's so fun at these premieres because they do silly little things like the N1 starfighter. They're like, come up on the stage and take a picture. And you just kind of get to see like the starfighter itself. It feels so real. It's the one they used. And stupid little things like they gave us, was it Eggo waffles with Ghirardelli ice cream, and it seems so dorky, but it was fun to put your purple sprinkles and your little stars and get your popcorn bucket. And wonder who you could see in the audience. That was fun because we were kind of sitting near Seth Green and Claire Grant. We were sitting near Rosario Dawson, apparently, based on some pictures that she posted on the internet. And, just cool to be in the room with all those people.
Yes. And then also, like, just afterward, Richard and I hung out a little bit and we went over to the adjoining hotel where we saw Emily Swallow. And I happened to be wearing my armor ring. And I was like, Emily, I have the ring. Or like, wasn't it awesome? Like starting the season started with her. So it was cool. We got to chat with her some more. So that was amazing.
So what did you think that she was the first person we saw on screen in the episode?
Okay. So I think that, first of all, we hear her armorer tools creating something, forging a new Mandalorian armor. And I feel like this is just like a notification of what this season is about. This is like time-honored tradition. The Mandalorians have been forging these helmets and using these tools for thousands of years, I believe. And I feel like we have to think about like our faith traditions, in our society. And I think there's a link there. I mean, because our traditions have gone back thousands of years. I was raised Catholic, and that goes back, thousands of years. And so I'm just curious. I want to follow that thread throughout the season. Hearing that sound at the beginning is like, oh, okay, this is what the season is going to be about. And then we see the armor, and I want to know, what is the stuff that she pours in the liquid that she uses to forge? And I have a theory, but what do you think?
I want to hear your theory. Tell me.
Okay. Because you see, and actually Richard and I watched the previous Book of Boba Fett episodes before we saw this. So we saw her do the same thing. She prepares her tools. She prepares the liquid thing, like it's like a kettle drum almost, but it's filled with liquid. And then she has this little vial that she pours liquid in it. And it looks like water, but I think it's a piece of the living waters from Mandalore. I think that's what it is. It's almost like holy water. I mean, if you want to talk about this thread of faith. So that's what I think it is.
And Jon Favreau said specifically in a couple interviews, not with us, but with other outlets, that he was sort of pulling on Western religion, where often we see Eastern religion pulled on in Star Wars with the Jedi. So he is pulling some Western religion in. And notably, the green shard with the words on it that enhance her. The translation is out of the King James Bible from Exodus.
What?
Yeah.
What is it?
I can't remember. I didn't write it down, but it's out there on the internet. These people that you can't get anything past them. It's talking about the plague of locusts, essentially.
Oh.
And if you look at Din and Grogu, there's sort of this kind of Moses allegory there. I mean, Grogu's even in a basket going around. So he's still on the river, apparently. Or if you just think about that symbolism in there, and maybe it wasn't as strong, but it felt in this episode like they were sort of leaning into it a bit more.
Yeah. See, this is why I wish we would have seen some of these episodes before we got to talk to them, because I would totally ask them, what is that armor pouring? What is that thing? Anyway.
They're more afraid of us, I think, if we have too much information.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I have a question, because this episode is called The Apostate. What is the actual definition?
It's the act to refuse to follow or obey a religious faith, or the abandonment of a previous loyalty. So could it be the armor? Absolutely. It could be the armor who's apostate, even though she's calling him one. People out who in that type of position often like to project things onto other people. So I think that's one person.
Okay, question though. So you think has left the previous religious faith of the Mandalore?
Well, I think that we're going to learn enough about her that she is operating in a way that Bo says is not correct. And so is Bo's way correct? Not necessarily, but it feels like the taking off, you can't take off your helmet, some of the sort of really zealous approach that she pushes, it feels like there's something there. She turned away from a certain value or got too hardcore that she herself has abandoned the faith or taken it in a direction that isn't healthy either. And that shows up in a way, I think, symbolically, this baptism of the boy on the beach, which I originally thought was a flashback.
Yeah, me too.
Din, and a lot of people have read it as that. It's a cycle, right? There's always new people being baptized in, but it was crashed, right, by this monster. It was not allowed. That's kind of symbolic of maybe the force or whatever it is for the Mandos, whatever that all encompassing spirit or mysticism. There's definitely mysticism in the storytelling. It crashed it, like it wasn't successful, like. And not only that, they weren't able to fight together. Like their system isn't really working for them. They weren't successful in defeating it. They had to have help. And so she could be one of the apostates. She's calling Din the apostate, and she called him that in the Book of Boba Fett. So you take that as, well, that's who he is. And then you also have Bo at the end, who's sitting there on a throne, who believed that Mandalore could be saved. And she had belief that she could get the Darksaber back and do the things. And she's turned away from her faith, and faith in the sense that she believed Mandalore could be saved. She's turned her back on that. She's also apostate in this episode. So I think there's a triple meaning in this. They all need to be realigned. All three of those characters need to be realigned into potentially a unification of their vision, and finding a way.
And how cool is two of them are women that are freaking awesome.
I just love seeing the armorer do the blacksmithing stuff, because you don't even see that a lot in even, I'm in the horse world, and very rarely do you see women doing that. It is a very physical thing to do what she would be doing. She'd be a very strong woman. And so it's really cool. I loved the alligator turtle, because it's in the picture, the concept art, it's more of a turtle.
Yes.
But it does have like a turtle back, because their original little things didn't work so well.
Yeah. So they crashed. So it's like almost nature telling the armorer and that sect that, like, hey, you're not working, or something.
You're not in
like
balance.
That.
You're not. Yeah. So
interesting.
And I didn't, that's after watching a couple times and sort of really taking in everything that's happening with all three of those characters and looking at it in that kind of way, and listening to some of the interviews with Dave and Jon. I mean, there's tons of interviews out there, and everybody asks them a different question. And, some of them really talked about that kind of magic or mysticism applied here also to the Mandalorians. And I feel like it's Star Wars, so you can't get away from that.
You need that. Yeah. I'm so curious. Yeah. Okay. This is cool. We'll continue this discussion in later episodes, but let's move on to the next scene, which is Din and Grogu in the starfighter in hyperspace. And what do we see, Tricia?
Space Purgles. I mean, to me, that was it. I wanted to squeal in the movie theater, but you're in a screening, you're sitting definitely around Lucasfilm people, and you don't want to like break the thing. So I was like, kind of like, like if I'd been at home, I would have been jumping up and down, being like, what?
Yeah, but then it did get a big reaction. Like it was kind of like a wave of whoa, right?
Well, and you felt like you thought you were seeing it, and then they do that shot that they pull back, and you can kind of see the N1 is really small and these enormous space purgles, you know, floating through hyperspace with them. And so that was kind of like, whoa, amazing. And then I want to think about that in the way that, to me, that felt very much like Grogu is looking at them, and that's they have some tie to the Force. And he was looking at them and gazing up at them. And I felt like that was like a call, and it was all in the light. And he sunk back down and crawled into Din's lap. He turned his back on them. And to me, it felt like in Grogu's journey, this is kind of a reminder in this, not in Mando season 2, which Mando season 2.5, which is the Boba Fett, that they had to remind us that Grogu had turned his back on being a Jedi. I feel like the Force was calling back out to him, and he went back to the comfort of napping with Din. Like, he's still, to me, this is symbolically summoning him, and it's a refusal of the call in his journey. And they could take his journey for a long time, but I felt that was very symbolic of it.
I think that makes sense. And just on another level, just watching it, like, have you ever been on a boat or a ship where all the porpoises, dolphins are like following you? Yeah, like jumping around you. It's magical. Like, it's totally magical. Like, between here and Catalina, there's like a school of 200 dolphins. And if you ever are on the bow of a ship and the dolphins are jumping, it's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. So it's kind of like that as well. Plus, Purgle, you know, we first saw them in Star Wars Rebels. Thrawn was introduced in Star Wars Rebels. So come on, this is like a call that Thrawn is going to come to Mandalorian, is my hope.
Absolutely. And then they went to Navarro, and while we're on this topic of Force creatures, I feel pretty confident that those are convors in the tree around Grogu as well, which is another animal that's tied to the Force. And there's one in the tree, and there's 2 up on the building that aren't as visible.
Okay, because there was a creature that was on the IG-11 statue, but that looked a little different. Did you think that was a convor?
I think it's a convor. We haven't seen it in live action, but
right.
That's what I'm going with until somebody proves me wrong.
Right. It had the convor tail. It's the head looked different. It had more of a beak rather than a round head like a convor. But I think that would be amazing if the convor was there, and it would make sense. Yeah. So let's talk about this town, the Navarro town, which is totally changed. I mean, you just rewatch season 1 again of Mandalorian, where he walks through this dirty, dusty western town, and to think that this is the same thing, this cleaned up town, is amazing. And I love the look of it so much. It reminds me of like the 1400s to 1500s, the medieval kind of transition to Renaissance period in Europe. And we even have minstrels playing and singing in the streets. So, and the music too is reflecting this feel, because if you just listen to the music in this section where Din and Grogu are walking through town, it just sounds like maybe a quintet or 6 people playing their flutes, some simple winds, drums, and strings, just like the minstrels would be. It's really neat.
It felt like a Renaissance fair.
Yeah, it did. And even down to Grief, what he was wearing, like he comes in Mando and he's got these robes like flowing and a cape that's being drawn by droids, and even that little weird necklace thing that sits on your shoulders and not around your neck, which had me really annoyed because I was like, how is that not falling off you? But it's like the elements that royalty wear.
Well, and he's the High Magistrate.
Oh, yes. And he has to remind people to call him that.
Yes, but he's given himself a promotion.
Yes. And then also the rich jewel tones, too, that we see around the town. You know, he's got that deep red cape, and there's some nice greens and the creams, and it's just so pretty.
We have to remember, too, that the Magistrate in season 2 is that the character who was the Magistrate in the Ahsoka episode that called The Jedi was not a good character. So I think there's still a little bit of question on where Greef's loyalties lie. I think mostly with himself. But beneath all the pomp and circumstance, it's interesting that he still was wearing his weapon, and he was a good enough shot to hit the guy in the hand. So he has not lost his, let's say he's not gotten soft, which is what they said to him, right? The pirate said,
yes.
Have you gotten soft?
You know, he reminds me of Lando. Now that you lay it out like that, it's very much like Lando. He's in charge of a space. He's like the person in charge. Yeah, like, but has a cape. And yeah, but he hasn't lost that smuggler way or whatever.
A really big cape.
Yeah.
I've seen some people talk about the fact that he was very protective of the school. I assume that's a school that Grogu went to and stole the cookie snacks in season 2, but we don't see inside of it. And there were pirates involved. And some people are wondering, because there are kids coming from Skeleton Crew, if it's possibility that there were pirates, or those kids have gone missing, that potentially they're from that school. I don't know, but I've seen people talk about it. So I mean, it was just weird because he's like, that's my school. They're like, it's a bar, it happened at that point. So is that going to be something that leads off into, we know Skeleton Crew is sort of tied in this universe? Is it potential that that's where the tying point is? I don't know, but it's something to think about.
That's fun.
Going forward.
Yeah.
I like, you talk about kind of the medieval town, and Greef uses the term landed gentry. And I've talked before about the armor, about Din having his armor, and now he has his weapon in the Darksaber, and he has his knightly steed in the Starfighter. And Filoni likened the armor to Merlin in an interview with IO9. So there's like this sort of knight errant feel to Din. And we have Bo sitting on a throne, which now I'm wondering, because I always felt like this was moving towards Din taking up the role of the Mandalore. But is he, or is he more of like the Lancelot or the Galahad, the knights that help Arthur take the throne and realize it? So I don't know, going forward, that's something that sort of just is,
it's something to think about. Definitely.
Yeah. And
I love that.
And we see kind of the Arthurian stuff. We know they talked about Lord of the Rings. And so again, Din has sort of an Aragorn vibe to him, and not so much the ruler vibe going on at this point of what he wants. Aragorn, remind me of his place in Lord of the Rings. He's the ranger that's been roaming around instead of staying in the kingdom, but essentially a knight errant as well. And so, there's this interesting vibe that they're going with, but it'll be fun to see. I have to say, then that little conversation that was going on, and he's talking about IG-11 and, just
Din or
sort of,
Greef. Yeah,
Din, and sort of the mayhem of that whole point. There was definitely some fun moments. Now that's using your head.
Come on, that was straight out of the prequels. That was awesome. I do love Grogu spinning in the little chair, in Greef's chair. And then there was such a meta moment when Greef is talking about, oh, you can bring the little one, you can settle down as landed gentry, and Din's like, Grogu. And Greef says, come again? And Din says, his name is Grogu. If you say so. Says Greef, and he just kind of washes it off, kind of like we do. It's like, yeah, all right. Well, we're still calling him Baby Yoda.
Baby Yoda.
I laughed hard in the theater.
Another point to what we see Grogu turning away from the light is just Grogu's using the Force very much in an id sort of way. He's spinning, right? He pushes the Force and spins the chair, and he pulls the snacks towards him. So he's still using it in an id sort of way, which is not the way you're supposed to use the Force, particularly if you're a Jedi. So to me, and they hinted at it in season 2 and didn't do a lot with it. But again, I feel like this is something that is going to be focused on, because they make a point of showing him using the Force in a way that he shouldn't be, and not the way that Luke would have taught him. And Din doesn't know how to teach him that kind of stuff, right? And he's on this
he doesn't
quest.
know it's wrong even.
Exactly. So how is that going to play out with that character and going forward? Is he going to be able to use Force? And Dave Filoni again talked about multiple times about you have to have discipline, you have to practice to use the Force, and Grogu's not practicing. So he was practicing with Luke. He did a good job helping in the battle of the Book of Boba Fett, but Dave Filoni says if you don't practice, if you don't use this, if you don't work out this Force muscle, you will not get stronger. You'll in fact get weaker. So it's something that you have to keep working at. He used the word discipline over and over and over in interviews. So I feel like that's who he's talking about.
And also, I believe, is it Luke or Ahsoka who actually says that in the series? She says that same thing, like you have to use it or you lose it, basically.
Yes, she did when they first tested, when she was testing him. She said essentially when he tried to call the rock. And again, it was in that test, he couldn't call the rock because he didn't want it. So he pulled out the little shiny knob and he called it to him, because we know they established that in the episode that he likes that knob. So he's like, oh yeah, I'll call that to me because my id's speaking to me, not because I want to do it for a selfless reason. It's all about selfish reasons that he wants to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's talk about this interesting quest so Din wants IG-11 and he has him take down the statue. They reestablish him, but IG-11 goes nuts and tries to kill Grogu again. And then they bring him to the Anzellans, which is the fun creature, the hey creature from Rise of Skywalker. And then they say, oh, broke, he's broken, so we can't use him. So like this whole quest went like nowhere. But it led some funny scenes, but I feel it's interesting that like it just failed like completely. What do you think
like
about
the Bad Batch on their missions? It didn't work out. Everybody's not doing so well. Well, the one thing to remember back is he didn't want to deal with any droids in the first season. And then part of it was he had to overcome that personal belief or perception to work with IG-11. And I sort of felt like he was going to be doing this because he wanted him like a nanny droid, but he talked more about he needed him for, to scout or whatever. Yeah. So it was kind of weird that the way it was in there, but he resorted to his base programming, which in a way is kind of what Din's doing, going back to her again and being like, oh, I want to be redeemed. I want to be part of the covert. I want to come back to the, be a child of the Watch. So is Din reverting to his base programming as well? Is that what they're trying to point out to us with that? I don't know.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the Anzellan scene.
Classic.
Oh my God.
I mean, you kind of have vibes of Luke Skywalker in Yoda's hut, like the hunch down where he's down there. And I felt like the way they did the dialogue, like the Anzellans were harder to understand early on, and it became clearer, which was Din's point of view, right? At first he's like, I don't know what they're saying, but to have Grief down, like ducking in that little hole, because we had already seen the outside, and there was like a little kind of warehouse door where that they had their little door, and then sort of like a little warehouse door where they would have climbed in, and he's like ducked down and he's trying to translate. And it was just so funny. It's so Rick Famuyiwa, who directed this episode. It's totally his kind of weird humor vibe. And I was laughing so hard.
Yeah, the shot where at first you see the Anzellans and Grogu, but then it like the next shot is a little more establishing shot where you see Din crouched. Like that got a huge laugh in the theater. So funny. Okay, So when Grogu picks up the Anzellan, yeah, is he hugging him or playing with him, or does he want to eat them?
I don't know. I'm nervous because, he liked to eat a lot of things. I've watched it a couple more times and I feel closer to hug, but I still wouldn't put it off that he would, because he's like, oh, it's not a pet or something like that. Like he's trying to blow it off. But that's also Din doesn't think of Grogu as maybe as potentially troublesome as he can be. He ate the eggs. He takes people's cookies. So I don't know. But again, another show of Grogu just exercising his id of, I just want to go in and get in somebody's personal space without getting consent or anything. He's just like, so whether he wanted to eat or if he's just grabbing onto it because he wants, like, it's a toy or something, it's still Grogu operating in this mode of sort of like, I want to do what I want to do, which is, again, not good for a powerful Force user.
No. Oh my gosh. I thought at first he was going to eat him.
We both came out. We're like, oh, is he going to eat him? Like, yeah. Definitely. I was like, but then again, I worry about Grogu in that anyway.
Yes. All right. So after this, Din and Grogu leave and we get our pirate space battle. And here I want to give a shout out to the music, Joseph Shirley, because he uses the Mandalorian theme, but in a fun way. And like throughout the beginning of the battle, you can kind of hear the whole Mandalorian theme kind of stretched out a little bit. And then whenever Mando shoots someone, you hear that little flute, that, the little drum flute thing that happens in the Mandalorian theme. And then my favorite part of the space battle is when Mando, hides in the asteroids and then gets behind the pirates and starts shooting them. And the music changes to the triumphant horn calls of the Mando theme, that da 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 da, and it sounds like hunting horns. It's so cool.
Yeah, he did a great job. The sound in general in that whole part really kind of drives home what's happening there. And really, it's just a simple thing to sort of show that Din is completely competent and skilled in his starfighter, because we'd seen him fly his ship and do the things he could do, but they kind of need to establish right away. I mean, we see him swoop in and get the alligator creature, but I mean, that's sort of no contest when you have a, proton torpedo, just blow it up. But this is showing some skill that maybe needs to be established going forward in the story, that he's capable, and not only capable, I mean, he was taking care of, I don't know, I think there was 4 that he shot in that little, sneak around the asteroids type thing. So
yeah, I thought that was a fun sequence. Like, someone would see a starburst where a fighter would go down and they'd cut to the cockpit of the lead pirate guy and he'd be like, oh, like he'd be like, oh, scared. It was funny.
Now I can't remember the name of the pirate captain.
Me either. It's such a weird name.
It's a weird name.
Shand. Something Shand, right? It's like Gorian Shand or something.
Gorian Shand, that's it. Oh. He's played by the actor who was the right-hand man to the prince in the Cinderella live action movie.
Awesome.
Random.
I haven't seen that movie. Like
totally random thing there, but you look up all the actors and it's kind of fun to see them all, awesome, where they came from. So yeah, he was the pirate captain, wasn't very effective. Off they went.
Yeah, what a odd choice of face. The green like lichen crap on his face, I don't know, it was weird.
Yeah, that whole part, like I said, I know what they were trying to do, establish it, but it was a little bit odd in, Grogu got a little lesson and you push the button and you escape. So we get to see how skilled they were. And then they're off to see Bo-Katan, who's like the saddest person in the world.
Sad, sitting in her very cold, hard castle. That's kind of ugly, honestly. It's like a really ugly castle. Yeah. And does she sit on that throne all day, or when she hears a ship coming, does she go and sit there?
Well, it's interesting because she's she's not sitting the way the concept art posed her, which is sort of bent over with her kind of chin on her hand. She's kind of angled towards that relief on the wall, which is it's like a battle. And those are probably up there in the castle. Like, they show battles and they'll show times of peace. And I've seen some people talk about that's the war side, and the other side that she isn't looking at is probably the peace mural that's up there, and she's turned away from it. But we know from her sister Satine was the peaceful one, and that she was the one who joined Death Watch and a cult and wanted to retake Mandalore and return them to their warrior ways. And she's still facing towards it, but sort of in a frump and without purpose. She's very sad. But going back to the earlier baptism with the boy that we thought was Din comes in from the rain and he's still wet, and the water is very evident on his armor as he's speaking to her. What I thought was weird in the scene was he came and said, "I want to join you." And
me too.
I was like, but didn't you want to?
You're on a quest. Like, you're on your own quest. What? And now you're coming in and saying, "I want to join you." I was confused by that too.
So I don't know if like the intention was they were trying to get him like to maybe disarm her, or he thought he would take more to get the information. Like he needed to like, be around her more to get this information of where the mines were that she ends up giving him. But it was just a really strange thing to hear after he had just gone through griefs like, "Oh, you could be my marshal." And he's like, "Well, I have a pressing matter that I have to take care of." And he's like, "I want to join you." And I'm like, okay, does he want to go back to the covert? Does he want to join her? What's going on? But he ends with the information he needs, which is where to find the mines of Mandalore in Sundari.
Right. So that perplexed me too, because I think I watched it the second time. I was like, wait, he's saying I want to join you. And you're right. Like he had said no to grief, but maybe he thinks, I mean, he didn't know that she was going to be by herself. Maybe he felt he had to go with a bunch of Mandalorians down to Mandalore somehow. And so he thought maybe by joining her, he could get some friends or something to help him. I'm not sure.
She was the character when he said in a previous season that Mandalore was poison, and she told him the opposite, right? She said it's not poison. So I don't know, maybe if he thought he joined her, he could help get her back to like we need to go to Mandalore to do whatever. But she's definitely, he was like, "I'm going to get proof it's not poison." And she was like, "I don't care anymore. The fleet that I was working so hard is gone. I didn't have the shiny stick, and the people took off." And
you can wave your shiny stick around.
Exactly.
They'll follow you.
She didn't have the shiny stick, and those people were all following her. So is it that she didn't get the shiny stick, or that she thought that's what she needed, and when she didn't get it, she literally didn't know what to do, like at that point?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question for the character. Like, was that moment when she fought with Din and they got Grogu back just kind of, it unseated her so much in her belief system that now she's sort of floundering a little bit. Din is definitely floundering because he wants to go get redeemed. He wants to be with the covert. He wants to be with Bo. I think he just maybe wants to belong.
That could be, yeah. When you're raised like that, I think that's true. I think Bo, when, she's on the bridge at the end of season 2, and she realized, there was that moment when she realized that Din had won the Darksaber, and she knows that she doesn't want to fight him to get it, I guess, right? And now she's had 2 opportunities to do that. She's had that moment on the bridge. She could have been like, "Well, I'm going to fight you for it, because I want the Darksaber." Or right now in the castle, they're like sitting there. she's got her armor on. They could possibly have a fight right there. Like even in Boba Fett 2.5, Din brings the Darksaber down to that nether world with the armorer and the Vizsla guy. And the minute the Vizsla guy hears he's got the Darksaber, he's like, oh, well, that belongs to my family. I'm going to fight you. Like, he just decides right then. So Bo-Katan could have done that. And she's so far has 2 chances and she's not done that. It's interesting.
Well, I think she's almost afraid of it in some ways, but there's a lot of history there, and you could watch a lot of Star Wars Rebels to get all that backstory, but they're going to have to make it clear in this because not everybody will have seen that to see where she is in this kind of scope of thing. And we are going to talk more. There's going to be another episode where we get an interview with Katie Sackhoff and we talk about the second episode of the season, because I think there's more to be had on this conversation. But definitely in this moment, when this ended, we were like, okay, wow, let's think about these things.
Yeah.
So on February 27th, we participated in a virtual roundtable for The Mandalorian Season 3, and we spoke with Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and Rick Famuyiwa, and Katie Sackhoff. Today, you're not going to hear Katie's interview. And the participants were Fangirls Going Rogue, Sky Talkers, Skywalking Through Neverland, Father-Son Galaxy, Full of Sith, and Coffee with Kenobi. We're like the tag team here of great questions. And so we are going to play Dave and John's roundtable right now, and then we're going to discuss it.
Yep.
Here we go.
There we go.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Hello.
The Mandalorian and the Jedi have a long history in the galaxy far, far away, and both are rebuilding in the show's era. Is Grogu a nexus point for those two cultures to perhaps unite under Tar Vizsla's Darksaber?
That's a very interesting perspective. He is definitely somebody who has spent time in both worlds. And we know that he started off earlier in the Jedi Temple. We've seen flashbacks to that that speak to that. And then we know that he's been rescued and spent many years with the Mandalorian, went back with Luke. Now we've been 2 years apart from him there training. What's interesting is that as he chooses to return to his friend, the Mandalorian, because he's developed an attachment, it's interesting how that echoes in a way Luke's path when he was drawn to the attachment to his friends and how that helped shape the future. So I think that you're pointing out an interesting thing that we definitely discuss a great deal of where does he sit and who has come before him and what is the relationship of those two civilizations, because the Mandalorian armor, as Dave has taught me, is developed to counteract all of the natural abilities that the Jedi had and made it a more level playing field. So we have a lot to draw from, both from the Clone Wars, where they both cooperated and fought, and we also have ancient history as we saw in games and in extended universe, where we know what you're referring to, which is that they didn't get along very well in the past. So that's a very interesting, valid perspective.
Deep question.
Hi, Dave. Hi, John. Such an honor to speak with you today. One thing we see a lot of in Star Wars is the connections between generations, often in the form of master and apprentice or father and son with Din and Grogu. Why do you think this dynamic is so compelling?
I think that, we're all, as we grow up, we're always seeking knowledge. We're always seeking to be understood and to understand the world around us better. I think that, in so many disciplines beyond even a martial art, there is a master and an apprentice. In a very real way, I felt fortunate that George was my mentor for many years to even learn how to make Star Wars. So those relationships in your journey through life, you find people that know more than you and that help educate you, that help you on your way. And so I think it's just something that we all understand consciously, unconsciously. I think when you add a family dynamic to it, like Mando and Grogu, it's even more powerful because we have that relationship in our life from the beginning. And in Star Wars Rebels, we explored how that relationship can be different. It can be an adoptive family. It's not even necessarily the family that you're born into. And I think
in Star Wars, that seems to be more powerful.
To be something that happens quite a bit.
And that your bloodline isn't necessarily the most
defining thing.
Right.
Yeah, Mando and Grogu are adopted too. Mando was an outcast and Grogu was adrift. So I think people feel these ways, and that's why they want to see characters overcome them. We want to see, we are dying for Mando to shut the ship off and go get Grogu in season 1. That's the right thing to do, and we want to believe that we're going to do the right thing. We want to be Luke and be brave enough to not rely on the targeting computer and turn it off. We want to believe in ourselves. But it takes everything that these stories tell us leading up to that moment to get these characters over that hump and do these things. But I think that's why we respond to it. We see the characters do things that maybe we're not quite capable of yet, but they give us confidence to take the next step, hopefully, in life.
Hi, gentlemen. This is Sarah and Richard from Skywalking to Neverland. It's great to see you guys again.
Yeah, bright suns.
Bright suns.
We know you can't give too many deep cuts on this upcoming season, but can you give us some deep cut Easter eggs to look out for?
Well, that's part of the fun of the Easter egg, is that it's something that you find, right? Isn't that it? I will say that we really try to do everything we can to find aspects of Star Wars that maybe is unexpected for us to include. And I think that we had a lot of fun at first with drawing from the Star Wars Holiday Special with the Amban, the pulse rifle, and also the Camtono being the Wilrose Hood's ice cream maker. I think that the part of that I'm enjoying the most about this process is that no matter what part of fandom you're from and no matter what you grew up with and what era you connect with, we want to make sure that everybody we have something for everybody here, and that everybody's welcome to be part of it, even if you're a new fan. Even if you're starting off, hopefully, I think that was one of the nice things about the first season, is that these were characters. Now, if you knew about Star Wars, hopefully there was a lot of rewards for all the time spent reading the books or watching the movies or even the TV shows. But if you were new, you were just as welcome, arguably more welcome, because it's like we have to invite the next generation in, and it's always been an open door for young people. And as a kid, I still remember I felt 10, 11 years old. It felt like it was for me, but it didn't feel like it was pandering. And so we want to try to make everybody feel that there's something for them here. And we talk about that quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And we have directors from different segments of the entertainment world, bringing different perspectives, whether it's animation, independent film, So all of it is meant to really make it feel like how it feels when you're at Celebration, You have people from all around the world dressed as different characters, different ages, and everybody's happy and taking pictures together. That's what it feels like for us, and that's what we want to try to capture with the show.
Well, thank you very much, and ignite the spark.
Hello there.
Hello.
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 It's insane to be before the mighty Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau.
Oh, wow, mighty. Thank you.
Wow.
You're too kind.
Oh, I gotta put my heart back in my chest. All right. So The Mandalorian has been praised for its ability to tell a story that resonates with audiences on a very deep level. So if art is a form of a mirror, what do you think Din Djarin's character reflects back to us about ourselves and our society?
Well, for me, I can only speak personally. What appealed to me about Mando from the beginning was that he's somebody that's very protected. He's inside armor. And while that armor gives him a benefit, it also has him, I thought, incredibly closed off. And I think that we feel that way. We put on our armor a lot these days, and, everything feels very combative, and the world outside maybe doesn't feel as friendly to us. And so we're armored up. But the significant thing for Mando is that, when he meets Grogu, that all changes. It's small things at first, and it becomes simple kindnesses. I'm protecting him. Why? Because he's worth money. But then he ends up protecting him because it is the right thing to do. And so I think that, Mando as a character is reflecting this armor, but we have to ask ourselves, what does that armor really mean? What is its value? It is his face, but when he finally takes the helmet off and Grogu sees his face and he touches his face at the end of season 2, it becomes something more. It becomes, I'm showing you my true face, my true self. I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable. So I think that those are the things that really appeal to me about Mando, and it's allowing us maybe to take our own helmet off and be more visible to people. I mean, that's the way I read it. I don't know if you feel that way, but there you go. Does that help?
Thank you. Hello, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to speak to you again. The question I've got, and I'm sure Dave, you've fielded a lot of these, is just a lot of the cinematic influences. In Book of Boba Fett, there's definitely a lot of Lone Wolf and Cub in the choice Luke gives Grogu. But John, you mentioned in an interview Paper Moon.
Yes.
And I went back and rewatched it again, and that movie's so good, and it hit me right between the eyes. And I'm wondering if you could, if you both could kind of speak to the conversations about your influences in this coming season, and stuff that might be surprising, like Paper Moon.
I think some of it just is, the writing process and filmmaking process, but especially the writing process is not really a conscious one for me. We do a lot of discussion about, and very much a conscious set of decisions about the broad strokes of where we're going to go and what we're going to do. But when you're actually letting the characters talk to each other and the story's unfolding, if you're doing a good job writing, it doesn't always feel, you don't always know what's going to happen next. And you're really a product, your subconscious is really a product of all your influences. And Paper Moon was a very strong influence on me. And a lot of movies of that time period, I'm now in my, I'm 56, I think. Yeah, I think I'm 56. At my age, you start to lose track of the years, but late 50s.
The number.
And I grew up with The Bad News Bears, and I grew up with, Paper Moon. And films like that had, there were such interesting relationships of misfits who feel like they're don't belong anywhere, but these family relationships emerge. And then the family relationships are often stronger than the bloodline relationships, and that's certainly a hallmark of Star Wars. Families develop around these characters that are spending time together, and bonds are forming. And people are changing who they are based on the experiences that they have together. Look at the arc of Han Solo in the first film. Somebody who seems to be very selfish. And I think that progression from selfishness to living for something and sacrificing for people or something bigger than yourself is very much a part of Star Wars, but the hero's journey and everything that George learned from Joseph Campbell as well. We're a communal species. We're a cooperative species. And we are rewarded in the throe of history for when we act in that way, when we think about things that are more important than just our own individual needs. And so Paper Moon is such a wonderful film because you think it's all about transporting this character, to their living relative after their mother passes away. And then we figure out, it's a bit ambiguous, but it's suggested that maybe she was actually his daughter. What's interesting because the actors are actually father and daughter. But the idea that when she finally gets delivered to where she belongs, you realize, no, that journey was what reinforced it, and that bond was what was important for both of them. And so the unexpected twist of her leaving behind this cushy life that she could have had and going and being a con artist with Ryan O'Neal, I find an unexpected and fulfilling and really satisfying ending. And it's just a beautiful movie. And so, as you point out, we do find influences in cinema, stylistically, but also story-wise, because great stories have been told before, and Star Wars is a wonderful way to encapsulate a lot of what came before and serve it up to a new generation in a slightly different context.
Hello, gentlemen. This is a question I ask my mythology students, and I'm excited to see what the two of you think about this. I want to see if you can talk about the symbolism of Din Djarin initially struggling with wielding the dark saber in the Book of Boba Fett.
That's a great question. I'm glad you caught that, because on the one hand, you're super excited because as the first person who ever wielded the dark saber.
Oh boy, here we go.
As Pre Vizsla, I could say that it was that George, that was a reshoot, by the way, because I was originally, that's a public record, right? It was originally when I recorded the voice, it was a vibroblade. Mm-hmm. And when George had seen it cut together, I found out from Dave, because I got called back into the recording booth, that no, the vibroblade can't block another lightsaber. It has to be, and he created this lore around the darksaber that was stolen from a Jedi temple, and the idea of Tar Vizsla, somebody who was a Jedi and a Mandalorian, like. And I remember, like, I got to go back and record this. I told my wife what I was doing. Like, I got to go back and I got to do it again. And she was like, George is right. That's super cool. Super cool. And she was right. Like, it ended up being this compelling image of what this thing is. But then also I got my clues from Rebels where, you know, when Sabine was learning to wield it, it was heavy to her. And the sense that there is, you know, it's almost like the teachings in martial arts of, like, you know, you can't grab water. You have to cup your hands, and it's not something you could control. You have to flow with it. And the Mandalorian, somebody who probably doesn't have a lot of force abilities and doesn't have any training in it, and who's great at every other weapon, this thing is heavy. And you notice when Paz Vizsla picks up the darksaber to use it, it ends up being the thing that probably loses the battle for him in the Book of Boba Fett. That he's even stronger, but it's even heavier to him. And so that whole Excalibur, sword in the stone, if you're fated to do this. So there's something larger that's allowing you to wield these things, and they become mythic or symbolic metaphors for whether this is your destiny and if you're trying to force something. So, you know, the strongest knights in the land could not budge the sword and pull it from the stone. And you want to fill in the rest of that?
No, it's all very good. Yeah, I mean, you did wield the sword, so you do now. But yeah, I think it's a matter of, you know, when you're wielding a weapon like that, it is a lot of what's in your mind and in your heart more than your physical prowess. And I think that is what Kanan was trying to teach Sabine. She's fantastic she's a great warrior, but she's not balanced in her mind. All of her struggles with her family are preventing her from growing, are preventing her from being balanced in her body. And so, you know, with the Mando, he comes into this thing the right way because he doesn't really even want it. But that lack of wanting it is almost like a lack of responsibility. It's saying that, well, why don't you value it? And how can you wield it if you don't really even value it? So it's
and
always
also
a good
metaphor. What's also cool is when he hurts him, he's using it. He's like limping around like this thing. Imagine, because I always thought about that, like a lightsaber. If you don't know how to use it,
it's a fumble.
That's got to be a bigger. That's not. Yeah, it's not a good. It always amazed me that they weren't hurting themselves more with.
Well, I think a lot of people did. You just didn't hear about them because you hurt yourself. You're not in the story anymore.
Right.
You fall out of
it. But they're all having.
I was always shocked when Han used Luke's lightsaber to cut open the tauntaun. I thought that was a big move. But he's smart, you know, but all he does is make a little
that's
slit.
it. One quick thing,
Not a big deal.
No, he's not fighting.
He doesn't want to use that thing. It's like, here's the other thing about a lightsaber. By any definition of the world they live in, it's a really old weapon.
Right.
So I've talked about this.
It's not as cool to them, you were saying,
no,
as it
it's
is
not.
to us.
Like a samurai is an incredibly well-trained warrior, and that seems great, and they're highly effective, and they're very smart, and they have a way of being. And then rifles come around. And when you see the Seven Samurai, you see how difficult it is for these incredibly skilled warriors with with a philosophy and a way of life. But they just get thoughtlessly taken out by someone with a rifle. And so, you know, it's up to Kyuzo to go in and take out as many as he can. And it's dangerous because technology is overcoming what skill and discipline has given them. And that becomes a quick and easy path to power. Right, is now we have a weapon, a blaster that can just, you know, take down a Jedi. So now we have more people with more blasters, and that's it is an old, elegant thing to wield a lightsaber, and it takes a tremendous amount of training and discipline to wield it. You just can't pick it up and use it. So all of that then fits in with George's philosophy about the Force itself, which is, yes, we are all part of the Force. We are all connected. We all have it. But it takes a great deal of training and discipline to understand how to wield it. And very few people have that discipline. In our own world, we see that. It's so hard to be disciplined to do things that are good for us, physically, mind, body, spirit. So it's true in the Star Wars universe as well.
Great talking to you, and hopefully we'll see a celebration. Yeah,
hopefully, celebration.
Cheers.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care. Thanks
Bye,
for the
guys.
questions.
Great questions. Yeah, always great questions. Always.
Goopa noopa.
So I got the
Tricia, you got the first question.
Listen, when we're doing these, that's the best spot to be because you don't have to worry if somebody else is taking your question. You get to ask the question you wanted.
You don't have
so
time
excited.
to get nervous.
Yep. You don't have time to worry about it. And I was like, I was going to go for it. You know, you've got to ask the question that you think might get them to give you some things. So to ask that question about Grogu's potentially being sort of this nexus point that that the Mandalorian culture is rebuilding, that the Jedi culture is rebuilding in the same era. It was really cool to do it. Now, if you have a chance, go and watch the video because they do have video on Skywalking Through Neverland of Dave and John's face. And just watch Dave Filoni's face as I ask the question and as Jon Favreau answers it because it was really funny. Their expressions, like Dave's like, oh, what's he gonna do? Oh, he's talking about the Clone Wars. Oh, is he gonna say the wrong thing? And anyway, it was fun. After that question, Dave says under his breath to Jon, deep question. So that was fun.
Nice. So, and this is where Jon Favreau, I thought, confirmed that it has been 2 years that Grogu was training with Luke. So basically, since Luke picked up Grogu at the end of season 2, and took him to wherever he took him to, Grogu has been there 2 years. And this has been this huge debate now.
Yeah, and every time they clarify it, it gets more clear than mud. So I know Ash Crossan on Entertainment Tonight went on the red carpet. She tried to ask Dave Filoni, and he was like, I am telling you that Grogu is 50 plus years, and that's all I'm telling you. Not telling you how old she tried to ask him how old he was, because that would have worked enough too. And he would not answer it. And now Jon, it's 2 years time also since season 2. And then the way he said it seemed like it was 2 years time training with Luke, the way he worded it. Now it's hard. We know that we do a lot of talking, and sometimes the way you say things can get misinterpreted because you think you're putting a comma someplace or you're saying something else. So, to be determined. Dave Filoni did say to Ash Crossan that all would become clear at some point.
Oh, interesting.
What it is. But the reason some people were sort of taken aback by that, because it seems to make some things like, why would it take an Ahsoka so long to get to Thrawn, and just it kind of unsettles perceptions. But I think we'll just take a wait and see. And
also,
about it.
Yeah, honestly, the town of Navarro being so grown up, since, kind of gives the feel that it's been quite a while. It could be 2 years.
They have cobblestone streets now, which they didn't have. It was dirt streets. So there's a lot of infrastructure that takes place, which could mean that it has been a while. That stuff that they show isn't you don't just go, oh, I want it here and it's a year later. So there are things in the show that support the notion that it's been longer than we think.
Yes. Interesting. All right. Well, fun that Richard and I got to ask the question about Easter eggs, and we worded it in a way because we know they can't tell us what the Easter eggs are, but can you tease us with anything? And I thought that Jon Favreau's answer was great in that they try to pull Easter eggs from every kind of faction of fandom, really, so that it will appeal to everyone, or you'll feel special in some way watching it, right? If you came into Star Wars from the games, even those dark troopers are straight from one of the games, and I didn't know that. I had no idea they were an Easter egg. So, but the Purgle would be a perfect example of those of us who have been, steeped in the Star Wars Rebels and all the animation fandom. That felt really special.
And he used the word unexpected. And
Yes.
the Purgles are, and that's not something you go in and say, I want to see a Purgle in the Mandalorian, season 3, episode 1, right? It's not something that any of us expected to see, which makes it even more exciting. And if people don't know what that Easter, it doesn't mean it, like you reference like the porpoises, like if people know that about boats, that porpoises are there, you see these, and then you see people talking about, oh, those are Purgles from Star Wars Rebels. Maybe that'll get people, some of them, to go check those episodes out.
Yes, that would be amazing. Yay.
One of the things that I just liked was that Dave talks about the show being an affirmation, like that it's a positive. They want people to get something positive from this. They talk about seeing people using kindness, people doing the right thing. And they say that expression 2 times. He talks about people doing the right thing, and it's something that you hope and root for them to do. And going back and citing and talking about, that's with Luke when he makes the decision to say, I'm still a Jedi, and Return of the Jedi. I feel like Dave and Jon kind of have what Star Wars needs to be. Like, they've figured it out. Like when they first started doing the sequel trilogy, they're like, oh, it's going to be about family. And yes, Star Wars is about family, but there's these things about affirmation. There are things about teaching kids lessons, about doing the right thing that are baked into Star Wars that made them effective. And I just felt like they were talking about those things, and they really kind of, to me, ticked all the boxes of what I would like to see people say Star Wars is.
You know what? There's a phrase, there's a quote from Harry Potter. Now, I know you're not into Harry Potter, but like, it really resonates. And Dumbledore at one point says, there will come a time when you'll have to choose between what is right and what is easy. And right now, Grogu is choosing the easy path, using the Force to bring those little Skittles to him.
The red Skittles, no less.
Yeah.
And they did mention Arthurian legend and destiny. And Dave said, how can you wield the weapon if you don't value what it stands for? And I feel like that was a very, there are things that Dave Filoni says that you need to latch onto. And I'm going to latch onto that and watch these next episodes coming with that in mind.
I love that. I also love how Jon and Dave both kept relating this Mandalorian story back with just our own lives. Like how Dave Filoni talked about the helmet of Din as armor for not only the body, but the soul, and how that could relate to us in our lives. And, and how taking off that helmet makes him vulnerable, just like we can make ourselves vulnerable. So it kind of sounds like us on social media, right? You have like what you present to the world, and then there's like your actual self.
Exactly. So This year they brought in another executive producer, Rick Famuyiwa, who has written episodes. There's not a lot of people other than Jon Favreau who've written episodes of this show all the way across. Like most of it's Jon. And Rick seems to have like hit the nail on the head with some of his episodes, particularly The Believer in last season. That was the episode without Grogu, when they had to go and try to find out his coordinates and had to go into
they had to like
base.
Infiltrate that Imperial facility.
Yes.
With all the women.
And take cool. That's where he took his helmet off. That's where he committed this sin and let's just listen to Rick talk about some things, because obviously he's good. They picked him, but I feel like he blew me away in this interview.
Yep.
Great. All right. This is Sarah with Fangirls Going Rogue. It is so amazing to talk with you. Hey. And I loved when Din took off his helmet for the first time in the Believer episode, which you directed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this new season is going to follow Din's journey because of the repercussions of those moments. So I'd love for you to talk about why removing that helmet is so crucial to Din's journey in The Mandalorian.
I think, Din Djarin as a character was introduced to us as the Mandalorian. We didn't even know his name. We didn't have any idea about who he was or his background, but we knew, and he had this creed and this belief system that was built around being Mandalorian, and the helmet and the removal of the helmet was so instrumental and to that creed. And so I think just in terms of, you know, who he is as a character because of this bounty, from the moment he got this bounty and it was revealed what it was, it's completely wired his ideas about all of it, both his identity as a bounty hunter, but then he has his identity as a Mandalorian. And so when we were coming to that episode, knowing that with that there would have to come a time when, you know, those beliefs had came up against reality, came up against sort of what he needed to do, particularly to protect this child, and what would he do in that circumstance if he had to take off this helmet. So I think he made that choice. I think he made the right choice. But obviously, even sometimes when we make the right choices, it has repercussions that reverberate beyond. So I think in this case, and as we begin the season, that's exactly where we are. And even though he has this child now in his care in a more permanent way, those decisions for those who brought him in, that covert who took him in, are still going to have lasting consequences, which Din Djarin has to now find a way to atone for.
Hi, Rick. I'm Caitlin from Sky Talkers. It's so nice to talk to you today.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Our question is, your episode of The Mandalorian have been some of our favorites in the past. What themes or concepts are you most excited to explore when you take on a new episode?
Yeah, I'm always trying to find a bit of complication, you know, in the episodes that I do, or something that feels like I can explore a larger thematic idea, even though it's within the context of this world that's very very different than the one we live in. And so what I liked about, you know, my second episode was, you know, this bounty hunter was faced with the decision he made then to not, you know, or that he's going to now have to face this child and what this child means as he now has to deliver it to wherever he needs to deliver it to, and how that changes his ideas of the world. And then that obviously culminates in when he takes off his helmet for this kid, for the same reason. But, you know, that episode was very much starting to plant the seeds of, well, what are our beliefs? What do we really stand for? And if we only stand for them when they're convenient, then are they really truly our beliefs? And he got challenged in some ways by the unlikeliest character in Mayfeld, Bill Burr, in that episode. And so, you know, I think this season becomes sort of a continuation of that conversation now that we see not only, you know, is he as a Mandalorian has a certain set of beliefs, but we know that there are other Mandalorians like Bo-Katan and her crew that have a different sort of idea of what that is. So how those come together and what that means when those ideas that are so very different have to then, you know, sort of intermingle. I think that sort of complication has always been really fascinating for me, and this season certainly has a lot of that we will expand on, and so that I think is really the kind of stuff that I like to really get involved in as a director and a filmmaker.
Hey there, I am Richard from Sky Walking Through Neverland, and it's so great to speak with you.
Hey, good to talk to you too.
For the episode that you directed for season 3, was there a particular musical direction you gave Joseph Shirley that you can tease us with?
Well, I mean, I think what's first of all, I think Joe's work on this has been phenomenal, and obviously, you know, he's worked with Ludwig and been a part of that, and sort of continues on those themes that were built, but also just, you know, because of the size and scope and scale of this season. And I think they've all been big in their own right, but this certainly has a very, cinematic feel to it. So I think what Joe has done throughout the season is build upon that, and some of those themes feel very much like the ones that we know and love and are familiar with, because of just the scale of the show now sort of warranted something like that. So I do feel like we're feeling some of the opera and this season around as Joe starts to tackle the music. So,
well, thank you very much, and you have spoken.
I have.
Thank you. We're Kerwin and Keith from Father Son Galaxy. How are you, Rick?
Hey,
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi.
You guys,
I just want to say that I've been a big fan of your work from the very beginning. I enjoy The Wood and Brown Sugar. They're wonderful films.
Oh my good. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Your episodes in The Mandalorian have been praised for their ability to capture the spirit and the essence of the Star Wars universe. What do you think are some of the key elements of your episodes that make them resonate so strongly with the audience? And how do you balance the expectations of diehard fans with the need to appeal to a wider audience?
Oh wow, quite a question. I don't know. I don't know if I have a specific answer, because I think for me, I'm not necessarily, when I approach it, I don't approach it like it's Star Wars. Because I think what I loved about this world and what was so special is that it felt very real and grounded, and these characters were real to me, and the things they were dealing with in terms of family, in terms of just sort of adventure, in terms of just the call to wanted to make change, all felt so real to me. So and so that was all put into this world that was one conceived by George, that had all this technology and all these different alien species, and it had the Force and it had Jedi, but ultimately the stories were about these people. And so my approach has always been that I'm trying to find the story that resonates with me as a human being, and then hopefully all the things that make Star Wars what it is, enhances that. And so that's always been my approach, is to just say, let me just tell this story, and then hopefully it resonates. And then I think for me, being a fan of the original and just what George Lucas was able to create, I've always just tried to be true to that. And George sort of created this story that was about this particular galaxy, but he was living in a world that was very real, and those themes and ideas were coming through in the work he was doing. And so I think in the same way, that's what I'm trying to do as I approach each episode, or the work that I'm doing, is it sort of relates to me in a way that's very real. And I think that's what makes Star Wars, is at the end of the day, it's still real people, even though it's in a galaxy far away. So that's always been my approach.
Hi, I'm Brian with the Full of Sith podcast.
All right.
Rick, thanks for talking to us. I read in an interview that you did that the different directors always bring something of their own to the table for each episode of the show. And one of the things I've always really been fascinated by are like those cinematic influences. When we talked to Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni earlier today, they talked about like Paper Moon and Seven Samurai. And I know you kind of come from a different world of filmmaking, maybe sometimes than they might. What stuff are you falling back on? What influences or inspires you as you're sitting down to work on your episodes in season 3?
I mean, I think, look, a lot of those influences are universal, and they were the same things that influenced me as a filmmaker. And certainly, as George was creating Star Wars, influenced him. But, so I don't necessarily like, and I don't always look at specific films or genres as a touch point. But there were a couple of things, especially in past seasons, that that I really sort of looked at as I was thinking about my episodes. In season 1, episode 2, the child, I was really thinking about the kid, the Charlie Chaplin film, because in many ways, I was telling the story with very little dialogue. I don't think, I think the first half of the film or first half of the episode, there's not one word of dialogue spoken. And so how do you tell this story about this relationship when you don't have words to help you? And so I went back and looked at a lot of those films, particularly that one. And so that became an influence. And then as I was thinking about, writing again my episode season 2, I was thinking a lot about Wages of Fear, this film that I'd seen about these men who transport nitroglycerin. And so there was something about how, because they were in these life or death circumstances, these people who often were from different points of view in those moments were sort of free of fear, so they could kind of reveal themselves to each other. And so I think for Mando and Mayfeld being on a similar kind of adventure, I felt could be an interesting way to sort of challenge Mando's ideas from someone who probably wouldn't be able to challenge him otherwise. And so for this season, there's not necessarily one film or thought that I have in mind, but I do think about these themes about what defines us, what is our ideology, how does that define us individually, but then what does it mean to be a part of a larger group? And some of those ideas are going to be revisited here this season. And I'm really excited about those bigger picture ideas around the Mandalorians as we get into season 3 that have been seeded, but now are really going to come to real fruition. But I don't necessarily have a specific movie in mind, but I think that's really where this season is.
Hey, Dan Zare from Coffee with Kenobi. One of my favorite things about the behind the scenes of the first season, besides you wearing the J's, of course, best dressed director in Star Wars. There you go. I liked hearing about your the production and you all sitting together in that roundtable. If you could talk about your role in the production of the show and how it's evolved this season, and how does that impact your role as a director?
Yeah, what's been incredible about this experience is, of course, my Star Wars fandom and geekdom has been, thoroughly expressed, but really the environment that was created by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni as this show was coming together really set the tone for the experience of making this story, and it was so collaborative and so open, and he was so open to each director bringing their point of view to the larger storytelling, that it really created a sort of a family dynamic in terms of how these stories come together. And it didn't feel like you're sort of passing a story from one person to another, but everyone was sort of telling the same story and sort of understood it. And there was a unique way that first season came together, because we were all sort of new to the technology and sort of had to really know what everyone else was doing, that informed the process moving forward. So because it's always been that, and Jon has sort of been the one who has done most of the writing, if not all of it, it doesn't have the feel of like, what I guess would be traditional television. So it's always felt very collaborative in that way. So as my role expanded, specifically because I was also writing, and after the first episode I directed, Jon asked me to do another episode and also write on it. I've had the opportunity to sort of be a part of his process and that process as he's been writing, and thinking about the seasons as they're coming together, and that was the case in season 2. He asked me to write an episode, and so that meant hearing and talking to him about his process and what he was bringing together, and talking to Dave and trying to make sure it all lined up as I was writing, because it wasn't like a traditional writer's room. So we all had to be aligned in what we were writing. So it helped me sort of see the overall arc of storytelling. So this season has been sort of a natural progression of that, and that now that I'm coming on both as a director but also executive producer, being able to have been a part of that process since season 1, and now it's sort of expanded in a way that there's trust between the three of us, trust between myself and Jon, and as the show just got bigger and bigger, it's something that I think we all, having been a part of it from the beginning, needed to all get our arms around. So I sort of expanded my role in that way, but in some ways it still feels very familiar to what we've been doing since season 1. Thank you guys.
Can't wait until Wednesday.
Oh yeah.
Us neither.
Goopa noopa.
So I mentioned previously that Dave and Jon both talked about making the right choice, and Rick repeats it in his interview. And he made the right choice to take his helmet off, but there's repercussions for making the right choice with his coverts. And so it was just cool to kind of hear them both echo that so this is something they were talking about, right? It comes up in the conversation. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool.
That makes me, and it was interesting to hear also how Rick was talking about how the writer's room is not a traditional writer's room, and how, like even back in season 1, because the technology was so different, all the directors pretty much worked together before directing their individual episodes. And so, and then Rick was then taken in to write some episodes, right? So I wonder if Rick has become kind of like the new Padawan, like Dave was the Padawan to George Lucas. So I'm wondering if that's happening. I'm curious. Well, and the fact that he's using the same terminology here.
Yes, they're having these conversations, and Dave talked at Celebration about wanting to pass on what he's learned, and I feel like Rick gets it. He talked about in his answer to the Sky Talker's question about themes that he likes to explore complications, and those complications are always the things that make Star Wars really interesting, where you're bumping up against things you think you should do and doing, are you going to do the right thing? That's ultimately, Anakin failed at that, right? But Luke didn't. So that's kind of the scale of it. And he mentions a word in the music question about we're feeling the opera this season. And when he said that, I was like, yes, we're feeling the opera. That's what Star Wars is, space opera. So it's got to like amp it up. We have to feel the drama and the gravitas and the personal stakes. Good word to use.
Yes, I love that. And I love when shows or stories or books, like they'll start you out with small, and then gradually the world gets bigger. You have this world building happening. And so, yeah, I was so happy that Rick used that word. I so wished I could have asked that question of Jon and Dave, but we didn't get a second round. But you know how that is. You just have to choose your question and be happy with it. because actually I have asked Jon Favreau music questions in other press conferences that I've been in. And he's like very into the music, as we know Dave is too. Dave Filoni has talked about like the end of like in Star Wars Rebels, how he talks about the music. Like they both are really into it, but hopefully we'll get another roundtable at some point and we'll ask that.
Yeah, after it's all said and done, I'd love to ask some questions when we've seen it all.
Yes,
dive.
Now, one more thing that Rick mentioned, and this was in reply to a question from Father Son Galaxy, is that Rick doesn't approach, directing these episodes like it's Star Wars, because what he originally loved about the world is it feels so grounded and real and raw, and he wanted to give that feeling to us. I like that.
Yeah, and I'd say from the episodes he's done, that's true to sort of he did the episode with the Jawas when they had to go get the egg, the egg on Tatooine,
the child. Yes.
Just seeing these like sort of like, that's not something you'd expect to see, but it's very real and grounded. I did love that. So both interviews, I think, just really give you kind of insight into where we're going to go and things to look for as we talk about these further. Next week, we will share the Katie Sackhoff Roundtable plus our thoughts on episode 2. And they all kind of rolled together. So we decided to lump them that way for your enjoyment. So they make sense. I have to say that Star Wars fans are in for some of the best Star Wars this week coming up between the Bad Batch, don't sleep on the Bad Batch, and with the Mandalorian. And that's all we're going to say. But you guys are in for a ride. In the meantime, there's things that you can check out from us. So Sarah, what have you been up to that people should check out?
So if you want to see some of the premiere atmosphere and things from The Mandalorian, head to @SkywalkingPod on Instagram and check out our reels. I've got about 4 reels from that night, including some of the speeches that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and Katie Sackhoff and Din Djarin, who's
Pedro Pascal.
Yeah. So they said some things in between the episodes that we saw. So make sure to check that out. And also check out the full YouTube videos of these roundtables on Skywalking Through Neverland YouTube. See Dave's expressions. We've mentioned that before. They're priceless. And the comments on Katie's video, that had like over 60,000 views last I checked. So the comments are crazy pants. So go comment and say nice things about Katie, because there's some weird ones that I've had to delete. But that always happens, right? I know.
Yes.
People are stupid. So go check it out. Write some nice comments. Oh, well, what have you been up to, Tricia?
Well, for Fangirl Blog Hyperspace Theories podcast, where we discuss storytelling, we've really been digging into the Bad Batch. So we did an episode on the episodes 4 through 6 of the Bad Batch. Are they filler? And we talk about the character development, what a filler episode is, which none of these were, and sort of explored why you needed these episodes to exist in order to pay off later. And then we did another show where we talked about episodes 7 through 10, and that's the Emperor's Plot on Coruscant and the Ipsian episodes, which is really the ordeal phase of the hero's journey. So we predicted that in our previous discussion that we'd be going down to that bottom. The hero's journey is a circle, right? And you start at the top, and those episodes are at the bottom. That's where the characters really start to begin their transformation. And we talk about the visuals, how the visuals tell you that you're in the ordeal. And that's going to come up again. We're going to be talking about that. You and I are going to be talking about visuals and storytelling on our next episode. Okay. So I think if you listen to that episode, it really set you up for talking about things to come.
Excellent. All right. Well, reminder, our Facebook Zoom this Monday, March 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That will be talking about The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch. So come join us.
We'll do The Mandalorian first, because I know people have been dying to have that conversation, and then roll into The Bad Batch, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of people just going, I'm back there watching it. So hope you guys can join, and the information will be on the website. You can find it or on our Facebook page.
And in the meantime, you can visit us over at fangirlsgoingrogue.com, and we are at FGGoingRogue on social media. Tricia is at Fangirl Cantina, and I am at Jedi Tink.
You can leave us a voicemail, 331-21-EWOKS. That's 331-213-9657. Or you can just record yourself and send us an email, contact@fangirlsgoingrogue.com, whichever you'd like, or write us an email.
There you go. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search Fangirls Going Rogue and like the page and join the group and answer the questions that pop up.
And please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. We need your reviews so more people can find us.
So until next time, do. Yup.
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 Yup.